Good evening, workshoppers. It's another episode, starting the year off strong. We've took a little bit of break there, over the winter, but back at it. And, new year, we got a lot to talk about. Maybe not so much on the Diablo front right now, but there's a lot going on in the ARPG genre at the moment, or at least not at the moment, but in the coming year, or at the moment. I don't know what I'm doing. But thankfully, I'm not here alone, and I actually have someone you might be familiar with, Leviathan, joining me on the show tonight.
Oh, hi.
That's my
Is
line.
dang it. I haven't done this in so long. I forgot. What do I do with my hands?
It's been a minute, man.
I know. Thank you.
It's been good to go through and have you back, though. I know we were, I guess a little bit pulling back the veil a little bit from behind the scenes. We were actually talking, at BlizzCon about wanting to go through and meet up and having like a BlizzCon like thoughts and such on the show. But then you got sick.
The BlizzCon plague.
Yeah, and
Jesus.
then like I basically took December off from the podcast because of just work and everything else. So I didn't even try reaching back out to you in order to try and get it. I think you actually reached out to me to like kind of like remind me about coming back on the show and such. And so, well, here we are.
We're doing it live.
We're doing it live, like quite literally.
Yeah, thanks so much for bringing me back in, opening up the door from the storm. It's cold as heck up here. It's heckin' cold.
Man, it's heckin' cold down here.
It's sweeping the nation. Swiffering the nation.
It's like 47 degrees out or something like that.
Dude, that's like our high tomorrow, and people are busting out the shorts, I think.
Oh, God.
Yes, it's going to be so warm.
It's like one of those things that your brain just has like problems comprehending, like the actual like distances between, like Earth and the moon or like Earth and Mars. It's like you can read, that it's like a couple million miles or something like that, but you don't know what that, you don't actually understand like the concept of how far that distance actually is.
No, you just have to believe in it.
Yeah.
It is as they tell you it is.
Yeah, it was at work last night. It actually dropped to 39.
Ooh.
And yeah, at the theater, in the unoccupied state during those times, it's just the fans, so it's just pulling in the outside air. The heater won't kick in,
Lord.
and it was brisk. It was chilly the whole night.
I mean, I literally feel you at that moment because, well, I guess I can't literally feel you because I'm here, but I figuratively feel you perhaps because that is the cutoff for me when, and we're doing a weather podcast now, which is great. When I will put gloves on, like if it drops below 40, then that it's like too cold to just straight go outside anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure you were just dying at that point.
Pretty much. I got some of my work done, and then I just held up in like the manager's office. I rebooted all of the computers, turned on the monitors just to try and raise the temperature up a little bit, type thing. Yeah, because unfortunately, it's like I don't have access to override the occupancy timer.
You should have just been like ripping out cooling fans from stuff,
Call security. Yeah, call security. Let me get up to the roof. Just like take the panel off. Just start hot wiring. One of the RTUs. It's like I'm gonna get this heater on. I'm gonna find a way.
Well, that's part of your job description, right?
Totally.
Among everything else.
Pretty much. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if I'm held accountable for like not repairing one of those units should something go wrong.
God, I love it.
So fun. But yeah, this the topic of tonight's episode you pretty much had kind of like put forth, because we've got a lot coming this year in terms of ARPGs, and that even though like last year was a really good year where we had the new expansion from Grim Dawn, Chaos Bane, obviously the announcement of Diablo IV and PoE 2. There's a lot that's been coming out on the ARPG genre that it is definitely kicking it into high gear.
Yeah, and it seems like a good time of the year to have a conversation like this because we're at the outset, and so we can kind of make, some thoughts and predictions and see how it transpires in the coming months. You're definitely right to point back to 2019. And I can recall at one point on Twitch and just the buzz in the community, so many of your quintessential RPG streamers were just hopping into every game because it felt like so many new offerings were introducing their alphas or betas at the same time.
Oh yeah.
While the things that were actually launched were making updates and stuff too. So like watching the Quins and the mods of the world hopping from Last Epoch into PoE into D3 when a new season pops up, like it was a crazy time to see so many different games, and that's only ramping up further from here.
Yeah, and it's we've had, like you mentioned, there's so many things that kind of like went in that beta, and it's because everyone was talking about Diablo 4, Diablo 4, Diablo 4, and it almost seems as if it's the closer that we get. It's one of those comments actually that it's a line from Diablo 3 that Leah makes while you're walking around in the sewers in Act 2. That greater demons leave a trail of lesser demons behind them, almost like footprints. And so as we're getting closer on the tail of Diablo 4, we've got more and more of these other games that are just going through and popping up. As it's fitting. It's kind of like the one flagship is kind of like bringing so much interest into the genre and making developers feel as if there's enough interest to warrant going through and taking a shot at this particular genre that had been left kind of at the bylines for so many years.
Yeah, and to bring in a conversation we were having offline, there is this categorization of RPGs as a really niche thing, right? Like it's small audience, but very a fervent audience. It's one that you feel when you capture those players, they are lifelong players, right? They are the grinders of the video games. I've often heard some comparisons, true or not, to console gamers sort of being the people that will pick up a game for 20 hours, drop it down, move on to the next thing. So the turnover there has to be just a lot of releases and stuff. But when it comes to RPGs, you have these games that sit out for years. We're coming into the 8th year of Diablo 3 being out.
Yeah.
And you just get that churn of seasonal play, patch updates. People still want to engage with that game, even though they've done the content hundreds, if not thousands of hours at this point. It's such an interesting genre to be able to hold players, and they have those expectations too to be held for that long. Now that we're in sort of the transition period, leaving some of those older offerings behind and the new ones ramping up, it's kind of interesting to see both how the old will be supported as the transition happens, but also what sort of news breaks and how do the rollouts of all these different things occur. Particularly because it's not only just new companies entering the fray, but even look at Blizzard. They're going to have a triplicate offering of Diablo at some point: D3, Diablo Immortal, and Diablo 4.
And that is, of course, assuming that was all of the projects that they were working on, and there's not something that the incubation team still has. Whether it's an ARPG or not, we have no idea. But it would be cool, because like the Project Hades, like if they actually made a Dark Souls game, in between everything else, just to have like another offering from the world that so many people love.
Yeah, the franchise can be leveraged, and I was actually thinking about this earlier this week that Diablo has been sort of the flagship to lead the way into uncharted territory. If you just look back to, one of your first ways of experiencing the game was on console, right, with PlayStation. And they, in the newer age of Blizzard, were the ones to bring Blizzard back to console with D3 being ported over there. And, they don't even like to call it a port, basically reimagined for console. And then we saw Overwatch be able to get onto the console as well. And, now Diablo's going to be the way to lead into the mobile platform. And I make no hesitation to say that, and I mean, they said it themselves last BlizzCon 2018, that they're going to offer multiple mobile games. And I'm sure we'll be seeing other franchises leverage for it soon. But it's always interesting that Diablo's the first to go,
Yeah, they're kind of like mapping some, at least for Blizzard, uncharted territory, and even then, it's like you've got, what was it? When they went through and after they had done Immortal, now you have, kind of like Path of Exile. They briefly mentioned that they're gonna start going through and doing mobile. Or Diablo 3, they were the first to console, and then Path of Exile eventually went to console. Chaos Bane. What was it? Martyred. Inquisitor Martyred. The new Darksiders Genesis and all other types of stuff are all PC console games where you never really used to have. I think like back in the day, like the really only ARPG console game was like Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance. There wasn't a whole lot that was out there as far as the hack and slash goes.
Yeah, it always seemed to be thought of as a thing solely suited for PC, keyboard and mouse. But clearly, I would think it's fair to say Diablo and Blizzard should get a lot of that credit for showing what's capable. And I guess it does tie into some of the conversation we want to have of whose influence travels forward. For so long, one of the things we were recently talking about, Diablo really was the bedrock of the genre. And then you saw, maybe it's unfair to call them clones, but definitely games that were heavily influenced by Diablo, to the UI layout and the orbs, the iconic orbs of health and mana or whatever resource. Those things have still carried forward, and that's there's so much familiarity in looking at other ARPGs
or even
seeing some of that,
or even just looking at the whole normal nightmare hell difficulty. Like how many ARPGs completely copied that system where it was the end game was just replaying the same content at the higher level. Where now it was what, like 16 years, but between D2 and like a game kind of like breaking the mold, like, or I guess 2014 with Reaper of Souls, kind of like pushing a little bit more away from that and going more towards the torment system and all of that.
Right, or even Monster Power preceding it slightly before the changeover.
True.
Which also again was kind of helped with console as well, since they filled that gap of like Diablo 3.5, if you will, or I don't know what you want to call it, but before Reaper. Yeah, exactly. There were so many things that it sort of was able to lead the way with because it was a different look at Diablo, and then a lot of that got rolled into Reaper of Souls. I hadn't even really thought about that point. It's a good one to make because if you think about even the origins of PoE, they did have that same thing with, it was like cruel, merciless, and I'm getting them in different orders and stuff, but they had that same transcendence of work through the difficulties, and now they've gone away from that. And I can even think back to the short time I played Torchlight 2. It was arranged similarly as well. You could pick different difficulties, but so many of the games now really want this open world, almost like adventure mode feel to them. PoE to some degree is still a bit on rails, and I think they'll all always have that campaign aspect to them, that story aspect. How much they force you to go through it or not will wait to be seen. PoE seems really beholden to it. Diablo 3, you don't necessarily have to do it, but new players and new accounts have to, or if you're outside a season, you have to.
Yeah, at least once. You have to do it at least once, but then you have going forward Diablo 4, which is supposed to be open-ended, explore as you will. That here's the world, take the story in whatever path that you want it to take.
Yeah, and so will that be the next echo that moves through the genre of I guess we don't have to force do acts 1 through 5 or however many acts we have. Maybe we can tell this story in fractured or disparate ways and still deliver a solid offering for the people that really enjoy the lore and the exploration aspects. We can really deliver that without it being so rigid or on rails.
And this is just one of those ones where it kind of took me a while to kind of realize it, but this is kind of the storytelling that Blizzard has mostly been doing, because with World of Warcraft, as of the last couple of expansions, it used to be, you'd have the whole world, and I had to go to Zone A before I could go to Zone B, before I could go to Zone C, and that there was a loose connection of story between all the different zones, but it was your level that mostly dictated it. But the last couple of expansions, you pick the order that you play in, and that there's an overarching story that it all makes sense as you complete the story in that particular zone. That then once it's all done, you have the whole world to explore, and then kind of like the main core of the story begins to take place. But it's almost kind of like told in vignettes that Burn Notice. That's the show I was thinking of. How Burn Notice, the beginning of the episode has a very important plot point to the overarching story of the season. Then the 40 minutes of the episode is just the story of that episode, and then the last 5 minutes of the episode is another important plot point to continue on the story of the season. You know, it's like kind of like told in that type of aspect.
Which is a really interesting approach, if you want to rope TV in too, because one of the shows I often think of that has so many seasons and tries to tell a full length story throughout, an arc of multiple seasons is Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And you kind of have what they call, I'm going to get the technical terms wrong, but there's sort of like the standalone episodes where, there's a baddie that Buffy has to slay throughout the episode. You see sort of the setup of something happens bad to a certain character or a random person. Buffy figures out, oh, something's going on. They develop a plan. They vanquish that demon or whatever. And it might literally have no connection at all to the overarching arc, where if you were watching it, when it was coming out, that was just a week where it's like, oh, this is kind of a down week. This doesn't push the story forward.
Yeah.
But maybe the next week you get like, oh, part 1 of a 2-part episode where we really like delve into Spike and Buffy and what's happening next. Now you've gotten away from that, like you said, with shows like Burn Notice and stuff, where you can actually still tell the story every time you show the show, but it doesn't have to be the full crux of each episode. There will be those sort of pinnacle episodes where it's nothing but advancement of the really big story they're trying to tell. But it doesn't have to be. You could just have a side episode of, hey, we're in Miami and we gotta figure out who this person is or something.
Yeah, and so it just has kind of like a filler in between with like the actual story of the characters is told out, over like the 26 episodes in like little tiny increments. Or you, like you said, there might be a couple episodes where it focuses entirely on it, but it's more of the concern of the week, the monster of the week, or whatever have you.
Another show that actually, now that I'm thinking about it, that does that super well is Blacklist. It's maybe not the best show, but each episode they're taking down somebody that's on the blacklist, and you might not see it for 30 of the 45 minutes of of the episode, but in the last like 10 minutes or so, Raymond will reveal, oh, we got that blacklister because XYZ of the overall thing that we're trying to accomplish here. And you're just like, wow, I can't believe they weaved in yet another character that didn't exist to this point.
Yeah, they got a lot in terms of storytelling that they could do, and like I said, I was just thinking about it. This was just like a couple weeks ago, that this is the way that they tell stories in World of Warcraft all the time, because those first like couple of zones when you go through and do it, like the order that you do it in, they have to kind of like have some way of making a semblance of it all, but it only matters at one time that you play through it. Because then you're done with all of the zones, and then now they can actually have a set story going forward in the patches, or expansions that they do from that point. That it will become a little bit more linear and make a little bit more sense, afterwards. So you've already reached that point, and then now they just have to open more doors for you.
Interesting. I wonder, since it's World of Warcraft in specific, and now that I've been playing Final Fantasy XIV, I kind of see how they tell the story as well. And there is a bit of that, and a bit of a difference, I suppose, is that because there's level syncing for a lot of events in FF14, you're not so much driven by go to this place for the level, but it's more just the actual game saying this is where the main story quest line is going to take you. Go to this city, go to that city. I wonder, as the ARPG genre gets married to more different things that they try to meld in, so we're seeing a bit of an MMO influence, even though they've yet to specifically come out and say that for D4. You can have that feeling though of that open world, the openness of the game, having a lot of those aspects that are MMO like. I wonder if that's part of why we're seeing the story potentially told the way it is, because that's just how it's been being done for MMOs now.
Yeah, you mentioned the part about level scaling, and they could go through and do that, so it doesn't matter where you are, that everything matches to your level. But it would still be kind of cool, and give it that ARPG feel that I think Diablo 3 lost a little bit when they synced everything completely to your level and got rid of the nightmare difficulty system, so you could just play through on normal mode, 1 to 70, just doing the story the whole way. And when you go back to Tristram, the zombies are also level 70. But if you're just like traveling the world and having dangerous locations, so that way, even though the majority of things will scale to your level, this one space over here, it starts at 40. It will never be lower than 40, so you don't travel through that area of the swamp, while you're leveling, because that's a high end zone or something like that.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. In terms of making it have that real RPG feel again, because I can think back to some seminal moments. For instance, FF7, when you step outside of the sectors for the first time and the Mictor zone's right there, and you're like, "This is a scary monster. I probably shouldn't take this on right now." But there might be that player that wants to beat it right at that first low level moment. We did see a little bit of that in the D4 demo. I don't know if that's how it'll carry forward, but remember, you could go, what was it, down to the south, and there was a little bit of like that harder fallen cave.
Yeah, you had the three, the easy, medium, and hard dungeons, because the story was, what was it? I think it's like you're level 21,
20, yeah,
or you're level 20, and then that zone was 19. The one with the goatmen was 22, and then the one with the fallen was 25 ish, something like that. Yeah,
in nice red letters too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think and hope that you'll be able to direct a bit of your RPG experience. If you really want that hard playthrough, as you're leveling, you can directly move towards, I want to really route my way through the harder zones and just see if I can handle this. You can do some of those like hardcore challenges and such,
Mm-hmm.
It should make for an exciting and different playthrough multiple times, especially since that kind of is what I feel will be driven towards with this open world thing. You'll get a lot of different events every time you run through a certain area. You'll be able to maneuver your path differently through those big areas.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully the game doesn't feel the same every time you get through there.
Yeah, or at least have like a different reason of traveling through those zones every time. That the main story introduces you to certain mechanics or places, dungeons, what have you, and then the next time that you're playing through, it's specifically in order to like find like this rare spawn or material or something like that.
Or they drop a world boss in there or something.
Yeah, because like there's Path of Exile, of course, has a much different take on kind of like its in game with the mapping system and such. And because that's also something I was going through and looking around, and just some of the other stuff that's out there. Because the one Warhammer ARPG Chaosbane, they released an expansion in December, but it's the reviews of it weren't all that great because it's like $10, but it's only about 2 hours of content.
Ooh.
Yeah, and so even though it introduces some like new items and such, and it's great for if you're a fan of the series, the lore and the monsters that you get to go through and take on, but it doesn't really offer all that much as far as the in-game content goes. And its take on it is basically mapping, that you can spend gold, the in-game currency, to buy items that will modify like dungeons or certain areas and stuff like that, to give the mobs certain affixes that then differentiates their drop chances.
Interesting. And I think that ties nicely back into one of the initial questions that we kind of have posed for this section, which is whose influence will echo forward through the next games. And I think mapping and maps in general from PoE is definitely going to have a major influence on future ARPGs, because it's such a robust system that not only is it offering enough of a difference each time you do it, but the manipulation of what the devs can do with it, how they can change the atlas, speaking very specifically to PoE, change the atlas around, change which maps are which tiers, to sort of provide different avenues of, you thought you figured the game out, but we're actually going to throw a twist at you this coming league. It's so many different levers basically for the developers to be able to pull that can keep things fresh. I would not be surprised. We saw the keystones?
Yeah.
For Diablo 4. So we'll have those that kind of do the same thing, modify a dungeon, add affixes, things like that. That's also a bit of the mythic dungeon stuff coming in from World of Warcraft as well.
Yeah, which though it's the mythic dungeon itself was more or less, mapping came first to Path of Exile before they did mythic dungeons in WoW, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, and so I
guess in there really early.
Yeah, that's one of those ones where it's like I would almost say that probably like the WoW development was probably like maybe influenced by what they were doing in Path of Exile, because we know a lot of the developers at Blizzard play Path of Exile in addition to a lot of other games. You know, and
And
so
of course, can't forget the influence of Greater Rifts, probably, starting a lot of that for at least within Blizzard internal talks, and then probably widening the berth of what else is happening too.
But it definitely is. It's cool to go through and you can look at like one game, you know, especially a non-Diablo title that's had an impact on other ARPGs that they're like, that's really cool. We want to copy that because it hits every note. Because for an ARPG, you want difficult content that rewards you with upgrades that you're not going to get, you know, too burnt out on that as far as like replaying that content. That the kind of somewhat randomness of the mapping, you know, kind of will give you that, you know, as you go through and fill out the atlas. Or I guess in like the Diablo IV terms, you know, just farming keys to get the specific affixes that you need for the specific dungeon that you need. Since they haven't figured it out yet, but it sounded as if they wanted to keep the keys kind of dungeon specific.
Right. Yeah. So have you seek out, Cave of the Fallen, with this level 27 key or something, and it has this specific affixes. Like, I think it'll be a good way for them to leverage content that will, exist into the future, but maybe be outclassed by, oh, I have no reason to go there anymore because the story doesn't pull me there anymore. My level is above it. And I think whenever you can leverage players going back, it's sort of a similar thing with level sync, right? Like there's levels or areas in Final Fantasy 14. Think about outside any major city in an MMO, so many of those mobs just don't matter at all because they're level 2 rabbits or something. But
yeah.
You'll have level syncing to these things called fates, and in your weekly resets, you need to do a certain amount of fates just to get currency and experience and stuff, and you can level sync to those, which makes them all relevant no matter where you are, whatever you're doing. So just the ability to leverage stuff that players probably experienced ones haven't touched or been to in ages, and still keep it actually useful. It's incredible.
Yeah. And I have a question, since I don't really play like Path of Exile all that much. But does PoE does have like certain items that are tied to like certain areas or certain bosses, right? That you can target farm for particular things?
I would say yes and no. Like their target farming system mainly comes from divination cards, and so div cards are tied specifically to certain maps. There are some div cards that proliferate, multiple maps, so you don't have to specifically run only like Jungle Valley or something to get one that might be in 5 or 6 different maps. But for instance, there's some really, really sought after cards. One that'll give you like Kaom's Heart, which is a really cool chest, very defensive. No sockets in it, which is pretty important for PoE. I think there's only 1, maybe 2 maps, and this is me with dated knowledge too, because they've changed the atlas recently, and I didn't get back to endgame in the last playthrough. But there would basically be like one, I think it was like Volcano map, that you would run ad nauseum, and you try to build it up with as many modifiers, as much item quantity, sextants to add more mobs into it and everything, so that each time you ran through it, you'd have the best opportunity to see as many drops and hopefully get as many div cards generated. But that would be ways to specifically get certain, I think they call them certain uniques, and be able to have some control over your RNG. But they have so many different systems that even if you're not getting necessarily a specific item to improve your builds, you could still use some sort of filler piece, whether you're trading or not, but just like through crafting, through delving, and the crafting, like almost each system, and maybe that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but multiple systems will offer you different ways to craft. And so you always essentially have a way to look at your gear and say, okay, I can make something that gets me closer to what I need for this build, until I get like the specific piece, like an impulsor or something. Like there's nothing that really replicates those incredibly uniques, but you can, have something to work towards each time, which I don't know if that like fully answers your question or not, but
it does. Yeah, it does. Because that was just like one of those other things I was thinking of like kind of like the one thing that, how do I phrase this? A question that I see at least a lot on Reddit, especially like back in the day, is that people would come in and be like, oh, hey, I really need item X, Y, or Z. where do I go to find it? You know,
Mm.
like what can I hunt? Because they're kind of coming from more of a like an MMO mentality or something along those lines, where it's like I
Mm.
need this particular chess piece, so I need to run this particular dungeon. And if you think that that would be something that they could do, like in Diablo 4, to add a reason to want to go to like a specific area, because oh, you know, it's like the one legendary that I need, you know, or like the mythic that I want, or something along those lines, you know, drops in this particular dungeon, so I just want to like run it, you know, ad nauseum, you know, just to have that better chance of going through and getting that particular item. You know,
That'd be interesting. Like no matter what key you get, you value all of them because they're specific, uniques at that specific dungeon.
yeah, you know, because that's
Mm.
something that is not something that Diablo as a series has ever really done. I guess a little bit. You have um, the bounty items. You have to farm bounties in that
Mhm.
one particular act in order to get like those specific items, and that they're hard locked into only attainable through that method. Or like back in Diablo 2, that not necessarily like target farming, but there was a lot of items, you know, like the Wind Force or Death's Web and such, that like you're limited to like the pit or the
The
cave,
pit,
and
right?
yeah,
That's
other
what it's like.
places that you could actually get like level 98 monsters to spawn
Yeah.
that could drop the actual like the, you know, item level 97, 99 items that otherwise just could not drop from anything else in the game, period.
Or even more iconically, the boss runs to some degree, right? Like running a lot of Nightmare Meth to get specific uniques like your Scolders or your Shakos and such.
Yeah,
Um,
normal Diablo or Nightmare Andy for Stone of Jordan's, you know.
SOJ, yeah.
Yeah.
So I wonder, and that's always been a thing that I think a lot of the longtime Diablo players had a bit of a gripe with D3. They wanted boss runs back. They wanted to do some of that like more repetitive. I know exactly where to go to get certain types of items.
Mm-hmm.
So with D4 seeming to want to please a lot of, all right, this is what used to happen. We're going to bring it back in some form or fashion. We don't really know that much about how the drop system will work in terms of what drops where, but I could
I don't.
definitely see that.
To be fair, I don't think that they have that much more of an idea than we do at this point in time about what it's going to look like. So
I guess that's always worth reiterating, right? D4 is still so early in its inception. Um, as much as we want it to be way, way further along and hopefully closer to beta or alpha or anything,
mm-hmm.
I always balk at, or maybe bulk's the wrong word, but I always still get a little taken aback when they're like, remember, this is, they like drill it into us. Remember at one point they were drilling like multiple teams, multiple projects. I feel like
Mm-hmm.
the new slogan is really early in development, or however they put it.
Yeah, it you know, mentioned at least like once every couple of paragraphs. You know, in
It's so
any
true.
of the blog posts that they go through and do. Which actually, since the last episode, we've had clarification now that they are, even though right after BlizzCon we were kind of like hit with a whole bunch of developer updates.
Mhm.
That I wasn't expecting them to go through and start communicating so early. But now they kind of codified it that it is going to be, they're going to go to like quarterly updates, but they'll make it worth the time. So there's going to be a lot that goes into these particular updates that we'll see, you know, once every quarter. That might
Yeah, and
involve
actually,
like videos and stuff like that as well.
that's going to be so exciting. I think that's actually a good point to kind of briefly, before we expand, bring in just kind of some of the items that we're tracking for this coming year. So you just mentioned the quarterly blog post for Diablo 4.
Mm-hmm.
That's sort of the only known quantity that we have for that specific game. Who knows what other like nuggets they'll drop on us, but we at least have that bar minimum. We'll get 4 hopefully solid, sizable, like you said, maybe some videos and stuff showcasing what exactly the dev team is up to with the game.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
And fingers crossed, another playable demo at BlizzCon. A different playable demo, I should say.
that'd be so hype. Maybe multiple classes will have been revealed by then to fill out the roster.
Yeah, given how far away that it is, I'm kind of getting the feeling they're gonna do it like what they did with D3. Is, you know, it's one class a year at BlizzCon type thing that
Mm,
they'll go and show off.
mm, I could see that.
Yeah,
I mean, that's fine too. I just
really just
anything.
we know it's
um,
years away, but we want more already.
Oh yes, and then keeping it within the Diablo family for 2020, some known quantities we have for D3 are that PTRs are still going to be rolling out in the midst of seasons. We have season 20 on the horizon. and we know that there will be new classes. Or wow, sorry,
New classes confirmed. You heard it here first.
Uh-oh, leaks. New class sets. You didn't let me finish. Class
Oh,
sets.
sorry.
That are going to be dropping. We already have the Crusaders and the Monks, so that still leaves 5 other classes to get theirs. I'm hoping Demon Hunter is coming next because they need some love.
I have a thought.
Oh.
I have a thought. I'm going to guess at least one. And if I had to guess one of the classes, it would be the Witch Doctor.
Yeah. They are the most likely candidate because, man, they're lagging behind.
They are really lagging behind. Like on the last episode, I was going through and like talking about class balance like a little bit to go through and like the Necromancer and the Witch Doctor were kind of lagging behind everybody, but the Necromancer was like lagging behind so much behind even the Witch Doctor. It was like because no one's playing it. That's why. It's like it's not no one's pushing because now there's only 2 classes that do not have a 150 clear, and it's it's Witch Doctor and Wizard, and the Wizard has like a 148. Like the Wizard is much closer to getting that 150. Obviously, this is because like certain classes are capable of leveraging the seasonal bonus, a little bit better than others. But the Witch Doctor is just so far behind everyone else that they can't even leverage that properly to get to the 150.
So I think there's an update there because I have very, very loosely been following Season 19, so I do not even claim to be an authority anymore. But I know that Lex got a 150 down on Wizard.
Oh, they did? Okay. Yeah. I was checking this yesterday, and I didn't actually get around to checking it today. Let me go through and double check that.
How recent that development was, but I think it's sadly just Witch Doctor left out in the rain.
Oh no, yeah.
There was.
Sorry, yeah, I definitely misspoke because that Wizard clear has been a couple of weeks now. So I guess it is literally just Witch Doctor.
I didn't even know that DH had done one. That's interesting. So yeah, wow. I guess you are probably...
Well, the DH is another one of those interesting ones. So the top clear is a 150. Guess what number 2 is?
I'm going to say like 140 or something.
136.
Wow, huge outlier.
Yeah, so it's one of those ones where it's a similar issue of what like the Necromancer had. That they went like Necromancer went from like I think it was like a 127 to a 150. It was pretty much just it's like because no one was doing it.
Yeah.
And then suddenly it's just kind of like, well, I've been farming, I've got all of my augments in place, I kind of got the run and everything down. Now let me just fish for it, and there's no reason to fish on a 140 because it's all or nothing. Let me just do a 150.
That's actually a great point. So you're gonna just skip all the in between mess, the shenanigans, and go for the glory.
Yeah, because it's effectively if you get that good rift that would clear a 140, it's the same because of the scaling with the seasonal buff. It would clear a 150.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. So yeah, I think leading back to your point, Witch Doctors do. They're definitely due, which would be sick. Is there any skill or playstyle you'd like to see targeted for a Witch Doctor set?
Going back to some comments I made quite a few episodes, I think it was actually the last time that you were on the show. It was the Zombie Bears. I want to see them bring back the Zombie Bears build for Witch Doctor. That's what I would like to see.
That'd be a huge vanilla throwback.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, whenever I hear them mention, I can just think of Xanth on the DiabloII.net or in Gamers at that time. Just like, oh, I love Zombie Bears. It was his thing.
It was a fun build. I loved it thematically, and that's why I went a little bit overboard. Where it's like the set could turn you into a zombie bear.
Whoa!
It's like the set itself is like you're wearing a zombie bear and you summon zombie bears.
So you can zombie bear your zombie bear. All
exactly. Right, yeah. And speaking of Xanth, I mentioned this a while ago that I had been on the Diablo II, or I guess DiabloII.net because they changed from Diablo Inc. Gamers back to the original naming.
OG.
Yeah. So I was on the podcast there that we recorded about 2 months ago now, I want to say. But because they've been having some like back-end developments and such, that there's been some pushback, and so the episode that I recorded hasn't actually aired yet. So yeah, at some point in time, it will actually get out there. But yeah, keep you abridged on that one.
Just bonus content waiting to drop.
Pretty much. I think I'm pretty sure from what I remember, it still has aged well. So
That's good.
yeah,
like a fine wine. Yeah, so just diving back, we know that the sets are going to come, and not only bringing the new sets, those are guarantees, but also just we've seen the PTRs and patches been moments for the dev team, which are just rising above and beyond to make even more sweeping balance changes. Like we saw for the Barb, even though they haven't gotten their new set yet, they are crushing it because of a few item changes. So if we see more like that, each season could definitely have a very different look and color to it, and that's even before mixing in the seasonal themes as well, which they've been trying to make more robust versions of. So D3's got some legs on it for the coming year.
Because I mean, like the season 19, I want to say is both successful and not at the same time. It's successful in the way that it has given like new life to a lot of different builds and play styles that weren't normally effective. Like that top necromancer clear is the way that people have been clearing 150s in the necromancer is Death Nova.
Yeah,
so there's
so weird.
Yeah, it's like that's something that you use kind of like maybe like speed farm or something like that at lower levels in like the 80s or something like that, but not clearing 150s. But that's the best mechanic for going through and doing it, as well as survivability to do the 150. So it's great that the season mechanic has had an effect on the way people play the game. So they're doing different builds, they're doing things in order to like game the system. In order to like get these awesome solo 150 clears, but at the same time it's not successful because it really only has an effect at level 150. People that are going through and doing 100s or 120s or just speed farming to get their augments and such, it's not affected anything really. It's just a damage and a movement speed buff, and you occasionally get like a bigger clear once you hit the certain marks and such. And it's a little bit on some of the higher end farming where people are able to like speed farm a little bit higher content by grouping up the mobs and then AoEing them all down at once and such. But yeah, it really hasn't had that much of an effect on the vast majority of the game experience throughout the system or throughout the season. And so you have the majority of your gameplay, which is mostly unaffected, and then you have the part that it really has changed up there at the top end.
Yeah, and I think one of the conversations we've had in the past has always been looking at what makes a successful seasonal theme and sort of what keys you have to hit on to hopefully make it relevant at all times. And I still contest to this day that the Triune seasonal theme was by far the most effective. It's personally my favorite, mainly because it mattered at every part
level
of the game you were playing.
Yep.
Whether you were just starting out, you were hoping to see those purple circles just to get a lot more DPS out so you get to level 70 faster. Once you're actually into a build, blue circles were huge for more cooldown reduction. When you're pushing, you're hoping for so many different circles at the right time. Get those faster boss kills with those purples popping up and things. And it even opened up like, a whole new way to play wizard with the CDR circles and even some of the speed farming with the necros, just because so many of those builds are so dependent on CDR. It was just really cool that it not only mattered a lot, but it also engaged player agency, because you had to make the choice of, I have great positioning right now, but man, there's a perfect circle. Am I going to be able to move into it effectively and not drop too much DPS? Is that one even worth moving into? You have to quickly evaluate which circle is it, what's it going to do for me at this moment, what cooldowns are coming back, what do I need exactly at this moment. So I don't know, to me, in comparison to season 19, the thing that I kind of ended up disliking was, sure, there is a bit of player agency in when you might group up and then kill the mobs to unleash a certain threshold of massacre kill. But at the same time, it still just felt a bit more out of my hands and a bit more random. It felt to me I wasn't playing my build so much as I was playing the effect. And when you said like gaming the seasonal theme a bit, to me that really rang true, because it felt like I was no longer really in control of the clear based on what I brought to the rift. It was more like, where do the monsters lay in the rift and how am I, sort of manipulating them to make these environmental effects occur most effectively.
That was I watched like one of the one like someone had posted one of their 150 necromancer clears, and just like going through and watching it with their commentary behind it was just like they kind of had given up on the rift, but there's like I'm just gonna go to the end and check. And so they spend 2 minutes, then it's like, oh, this is the right mob type. So they spend almost 2 minutes pulling everything from one side of the rift to the other, and then going up, grabbing a conduit, coming back down, burning it all, and spawning the boss. Like, just they just happen to be able to have the time to go through and like get everything together, type thing. And it's interesting that the way that you put it, and that that's pretty much what it is. That had they had the time to walk to the end of the level just to see what everything had spawned and done, and so if it hadn't played out that way, just would have given up and left the rift.
Yeah,
You know,
it's pretty wild, huh?
yeah.
How far we've come. And Longshot kind of raises a good question. I was thinking about this myself. Maybe not so much of raising a GR cap, but basically, what is the developer intent, right? So now we're seeing an advent of 150 solos, which was sort of the pinnacle we were working towards with, call it power creep, call it, seasonal theme changes, whatever. Each season we were getting progressively higher solo clears.
Mm-hmm.
Now we've reached the ceiling for a lot of classes besides Witch Doctor. Is this going to be now commonplace, right? Does each seasonal theme going forward need to be able to achieve this level of power, or will it be fine to just not really care about what the number is? It's arbitrary, but the next seasonal theme, everyone's going to be hitting 140s, and that's where it's competitive, right? Like everyone who can get the best 140 or 141 perhaps. Or do we, I guess I would ask you, do you feel like we need to be hitting 150 now that we're there, like the band-aid's been ripped off?
I personally, I would say no. I don't think that there's a need in order to go through and continue to get up to 150. With every one of the goals of every season should make it so that way 150 is soloable. I think eventually we'll just get there from just regular power creep over time, because each one of these patches has been kind of giving a huge increase to player power. Even like in this last one you were mentioning, it wasn't even the barb patch, but the barbs got probably the one of the biggest buffs. They probably, I think, want to say they're probably on par with the Crusader buffs and were better than the monk buffs. That they got when the Crusader and the monk those were the two classes for this season. And if they continue to go through and do stuff like that, where if like say like in season 20 they don't do a Witch Doctor set, but they reinvigorate some of the items in order to go and give them a boost, you're just gonna have that little still power creeping every single time all the way up there until it just becomes commonplace outside of the seasonal theme.
That's a good point.
Yeah, because I don't think that the majority of like your player base, which is going to be a bit more on the casual side, is trying to get to 150s. And so if you have a seasonal theme that gives them the power boost that they need to like finish out their seasonal journey and maybe like clear like a 100 or a 110, is probably all that they need in order for it to like be a successful season, so to speak.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. There's two views, right? There's the less than 1%, which is often the most visible because those are going to be the streamers and such and the people producing the content
Except
making those
me.
clears.
Not me.
And Neinball.
Yep.
And then there's the sort of the viewers of that all, and the people that are playing at a less dedicated amount of hours and such. And so you're right in that as long as there's the feeling of progression, and obviously the people at the top are going to feel it, right? I wonder if they will, because I kind of imagine it from the streamer point of view of like, if I go into season 20 and in season 19 I cleared 150s like ad nauseum at any wave of my character's wrist or hand, and then some person comes in and like, oh, you were doing 150s last season, like what happened?
Why are you only doing 130s?
Yeah, and having to have that conversation of like, well, a lot of that was built around the season theme and blah blah blah. Like, you can explain that every time, but I wonder, they're not going to design, I don't think, around that by any means, but it'll be interesting to see, where the power needs to be to satisfy the largest audience, which I think you are definitely right in terms of most density of clears probably being in that 110, 120-ish range for a lot of players, and as long as they go up a few more, they're going to be happy with the result.
Yeah. And speaking of that 1%, that kind of builds on a conversation we were having last night. You know, like, I guess if you're confident or comfortable with the feeling that we've kind of discussed most of the things for Diablo 3, moving on to like the next subject with Path of Exile, you know, because they look at it from a different point of view and they focus on their 1%, that they purposely make their game, you know, difficult to master with high barriers of entry in order to go through and get into the game.
Absolutely. It's it's such a confounding thing at times because it works. Like you would think that they're limiting their player base by doing it this way and potential monetary gains from it as well. But I think one of the things we had mentioned to each other was just if you have that level of sort of captured audience, that hardcore fandom, which is really what they've cultivated, they are going to support the game, hand over fist, cash being just thrown at the screen as we see in the memes and stuff, because they're happy to keep getting that hardcore level of support.
I've seen some of the packages that they offer, for like support and stuff like that, for the backers, and yeah, those are some pricey bundles that they go through and they put out there. They wouldn't be doing it if people weren't buying it.
I was just gonna say it's price to move, right? Like,
yeah, that's what was it? That was like I remember going back and looking at EverQuest when they came out with an expansion at some point like last year. And they had like a collector's edition for like $100, and it's like, this is like they release like 2 expansions a year still. Someone out there is paying $100 for those collector's edition expansions that they're continuing to make them, this many years afterwards. So it's they know their market, and they're fine with it. They don't want to expand out. They've carved out their little niche, and they're happy with that particular type of player base.
Yeah, and I think it's still to kind of throw them some, I guess, like less criticism of doing it that way. You do look at the league; they're ones that aren't too shy about revealing numbers, and they still, with each successive league, some more than others, continue to grow the player base despite this, very steep learning curve and ability to get into it. And I think that really does come from a reputation establishment, right? If you have a game where the players always speak so positively about just what the developers are doing, how reactive and communicative they are, it can make you feel, even if you aren't fully bought in yet, that you can be at some point, right? Like you will be able to meld into this community simply because others have, and others are so happy with their experience. And I think we're in the day and age now where word of mouth is like better than any ad you can run, better than any print media.
You look at so many games nowadays that don't even really have a marketing department. They just have streamers.
Yeah.
I'm just going to send you a stream key, and then that's it.
Done. My game.
Yeah.
10,000 people watch, 1,000 of them get it. That's 1,000 sales.
You just put some bounties up on Twitch, and that's about it. You're good.
It's a new day and age for sure for getting the word out on new games.
And also, like, from like one of those things you're going through and talking about, like, look at the phenomenon of Dark Souls itself. A game that became popular because of its difficulty. Everybody knows of it because of how hard the games were or are. And now everyone goes through and talks about titles. Oh, this is the Dark Souls of blah blah blah. This is the Dark Souls of blah blah blah.
So true.
And so it just has become just a common part of the gamer lexicon. To refer to things as a Dark Soul because it was skill-based, challenging content that maybe not everyone is going to be confident in clearing.
And I think now that you put it that way, it overall helps me further understand sort of the PoE package, which is this really strong callback to sort of the beginnings of ARPGs, right? Like you think about Diablo, it was really like slow plotting gameplay, but it was hard too. Like,
very hard.
You could and would die if you got trapped in some really rough circumstances. And now, of course, ARPGs have sped up. Like so many of ARPGs now are about how can I speed farm, what's the fastest movement speed build and stuff like that. So it's not necessarily slow anymore, but They've ramped up boss fights, damage sources. There's so many things that can still kill you while moving quickly. So they're almost, still bringing that hardcore aspect. You think of like the Nintendo days and stuff of where it's so easy to lose lives,
Mm-hmm.
but still modern, keeping that modern feel to it of like players want to be quick and powerful and balancing, sort of these countermeasures of keeping it difficult, but still allowing players to really feel like they're badasses and gods at some point.
Mm-hmm. Which this kind of still ties into a point that you made earlier in the show, going through and talking about how like ARPG fans are very dedicated, and that's something that the Path of Exile started with, is that they wanted to make a hardcore game for hardcore players, and that they've kept through with that, to this day and continuing on.
That's actually kind of a good point. Like, not only are the players dedicated, but so are the developers to their mission statements,
Mm-hmm.
right? It really, the genre kind of encompasses all that touch it.
Yeah.
And I guess we should just mention, of course, PoE 2 is slated to, I guess, be actually playable by the end of this year. That was the promise at ExileCon last year in November, following shortly after BlizzCon.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a quick turnaround, and I think they're able to do so because PoE 2, it's, I don't want to, it feels biased because, of course, we're a Diablo podcast, we're Diablo friend. But PoE 2 is far less of a new game than it is like a revamping and a reimagining of PoE 1. Originally it was being slated as 4.0, which was going to be like just a major patch update to PoE the game.
Is it still using the same system, like the same engine?
Well, no.
Okay.
It is like an updated. So basically, I would say if you looked at Diablo 4 and you looked at PoE 2, they're way closer.
Okay.
So it's not like they're taking the PoE standard and just like slapping PoE 2 on it. Like there's a ton of, they're using now the same physically based rendering engines and stuff like that. So
Okay.
you'll see.
So there are some significant upgrades like in the back end and such.
Oh yeah. Because they've been kind of doing it all along, updating some animations, and as they release and revamp some of the skill gems, they've been trying to make those. They improved melee, for instance, just sort of the feel of that combat. And this is before any of the like major patch releases. So they're kind of paving the way for this new reimagining of PoE.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess it's just worth noting that like it'll be easier to both put out PoE 2 and also to have the sort of pickup of it and conversion of it, because it's going to feel very familiar and tie directly into PoE 1. Like you'll actually still have interaction with people that are playing characters that were developed through playtime in PoE 1 and such.
Okay.
But PoE 2 is like you can still play it as a standalone offering because it has its own acts, it has its own characters and their own ascendancies and stuff. So it's a really interesting way of essentially releasing a new game, but not losing all the content that you've made in the past.
Yeah, which is one of those ones that's like kind of like, at least in an ARPG, like with MMOs, you just have expansion, where all of your gear is more or less invalidated, and you're kind of like take over like maybe some play experiences, or they'll take some aspects that from that one expansion to pull and to make it just like core mechanics into the next one and such. But with the ARPGs, it's always you're completely leaving everything behind, your character and all that. But but we're used to seasons and such, so it's not as big of an ask. So just the fact that it does have tie back to some of the original content, I guess, is a little bit of pushing the boundaries of the genre itself, a little bit, which we might see in Diablo 4, given we will be able the gameplay area that they've shown, we'll be able to go to Chaldeum, we'll be able to go to Kurast, and such, and see those old places.
And I think this is this approach that GGG has to take. I think it's born of where ARPGs have gone. We were just briefly mentioning the sort of support model for PoE, which is microtransactions through supporter packs, and you get a lot of cosmetics with that, right? So imagine a world where a brand new game comes out and you've spent hundreds, if not thousands of dollars supporting the game, built up a huge amount of MTX, and suddenly you can't bring any of that forward. That was one of the talking points at, I think, the keynote of ExileCon, where they're like, we didn't want to create this horrible feeling of, wow, I built up my PoE account and now don't have any of that.
With that's the same thing with Overwatch 2. All of your skins and stuff like that you
Hmm.
can carry over. So yeah, that makes a lot more sense.
Hmm. Um, and so it'll be interesting for, because I think the two biggest dogs in the race, we spend so much time talking about them because they really are probably the biggest offerings coming in the near future is Diablo 4, PoE 2.
Mm-hmm.
There is a bit of criticism. Sorry, go
People,
ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, people are looking at those titles when they're developing their ARPGs. So those are pretty much the two that you have to talk about if you're talking about the
Absolutely.
genre, at all, because PoE is no longer just like a Diablo clone. It's its own thing. Like we mentioned earlier, like Chaos Bane. Other games, even in a certain extent, Diablo 4, are taking cues from Path of Exile. So it's kind of cemented itself in the placement of the genre.
Absolutely. Like that, there's no denying that at this
Mm-mm.
point. Um, I just wanted to quickly say that, there are some criticisms for D4, and, again, it still is so early as we keep getting reminded. Who knows what will happen? But for instance, people collecting all these wings and things, trying to get the what are they? The butterfly. I can't. Cosmic wings.
Cosmic
I
Wings,
blocked it
yeah.
from my mind because I just don't pretend. I just don't want to remember
Yep.
that they exist. I don't
Yep.
have them yet. The cosmic wings and such, like these things that you've worked a long time to get in D3, and those may just get left behind, right? And you even mentioned it too, sort of this transitionary period that happens when expansions occur. I think back to all the echoing furies that were left in the dust, right? And that people
It's
paid so much money and real gold for, or sorry, gold and real money
Yeah, it's been a trip playing on softcore again because I don't really do much
for.
on non-season, and so when I go in between the seasons to like take my items back into my non-seasonal character, I still have like a level 60 Echoing Fury. That adds like the point
The point
one
two
one,
five.
yeah, like the point 1 1 attack speed onto the weapons,
Ah, the
and
flat attack speed increase.
yep.
It's such a yeah. It seems like such a long relic, a long time of. I guess it is right. It's
Yeah,
back now 6+ years of
but
what it used to be.
But even then, like it wasn't worth. It really wasn't worth anything because it wasn't .15 and it wasn't a black weapon either. I think it's like frost
Hmm.
damage, so no one cared.
Useless. That was like
Useless.
500K on the auction house or something.
Yeah, if that. Buy that for 10 cents.
Well, yeah, I think we'll start to see a lot of interesting questions that aren't were never asked of the genre and transitions from sequel to sequel that are going to pop up now just because of the way that the genre has had to reinvent itself to garner support for future development,
Mm-hmm.
and also just think of players literally playing these games as like games of service
Games
like
as a
for you.
service, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And that I guess that is when you go through and mention it. I think that that's the pinnacle of it because as you mentioned, it's like a transitionary period where you're transitioning from this old model to like the new kind of games as service model, and how do you carry that over with all just be like, listen, you just have to start over from scratch this one more time, and then you're good. I think I actually asked that when they 2 years ago when they announced Immortal, if there was going to be any type of carryover between the mobile game and Diablo 3, where I never really got the chance to ask if there's going to be any carryover between Immortal and 4.
Mm. It would be interesting. And I guess that's a new wrinkle as well, too, right? Is to have multiple games out at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
that players are going to have different accounts for, and will there be any intertiedness of them to make up a word? We've seen some things like that, right? Like promotionally, if you buy, World of Warcraft, blah 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 deluxe, you get a pet in D3 or
Yeah.
something.
Or I
So I
think
wonder.
they did it briefly, I think, like in EverQuest and EverQuest 2, where if you unlocked certain things in the original EverQuest, you could then go like on a quest or something like that and find like a temporal or like a
Ah,
legacy item or something like that that might just be like either like a little thing that you could use to help you off with leveling or like some crafting material or just like a cosmetic reward or something along those lines to show that you had found this super rare item back in the original EverQuest.
that's cool. And in a way, I think that would be a neat way to pay homage to, all the hours you put in, right? Maybe you don't carry forward some really long sought after wings. But
Mhm.
since we have these accounts that are, there's a main platform to launch all the games from, certainly, hopefully, they could read that you've played D3, you have an account which has blah blah blah, and like you said, activate some sort of quest or achievement or thing that lets you carry forward some prestige, and that's just a way to showcase that you were one of those players. Even if you don't carry the exact thing over.
I mean, that could just be like one of those ones like transmogs and such. Like, say that you completed, the Kanai's event. You have the Kanai's Scorn, that
Yeah.
particular transmog. That when you go through and you roll like a barbarian at level 1 with Diablo 4, it could have like them going up to like their weapon rack, and the normal character just pulls off like an axe or something like that. But if you have that item on D3 or like achievement or something like that, he kind of like stops, looks over, you see the item there, and then he picks that one instead. Same stats, just like a different cosmetic, just to kind of like showcase that you had accomplished XYZ. Or even like in Diablo Immortal, where there's going to be overlap in the zones that you can go through and play between Immortal and 4 that you couldn't get to, like in, say, Diablo 3. But say if you go through and do one of those Zoltan archives in the northern Kyrgyzstan, in the desert north of Chaldeum, I believe is like where one of these places were, that in Immortal you go there, you beat the Guardian or whatever. It's like major raid, major dungeon, like some in-game content or whatever, and you've completed that quest. And that dungeon itself exists in Diablo 4, that when you go in there, that if your account has it completed, that there's an extra reward waiting for you down there because your character had, killed that particular boss or something along those lines.
I like that. And I think this is a great time to bridge in Diablo Immortal too.
Mm-hmm.
Diablo Immortal as well. Sorry, it's not getting a 2 yet. Because that is sort of like we mentioned, the 3, by 3 they come, 3 offerings of Diablo at some point. That is sort of the last thing to add in, is that Diablo Immortal is also at some point coming out, maybe this year even. It might just drop out of the sky. And
that was the feel that I got from the developers there. That the reason why they haven't really been making all that many waves is that they were just kind of going about the marketing wrong. For the people that play mobile games, they don't look for forward-reaching like media content or hype and stuff like that. They said that when they went through and they drilled into the metrics, that for other big mobile titles, it just drops and then the marketing begins, because no one cares until the game comes out,
until they can play it and down. That makes a lot of sense. And I think they're going to, it ties back certainly to what we had sort of opened with. They are really being the ones to foray into that murky water for the first time, right? So I think all the potential mistakes you can make, all the gains you can make, they're going to learn so much and be able to disseminate that info to the other Blizzard teams, because this is the first time, right? They're really hitting the platform sort of naked and trying to figure out, where do we get our clothes, what do we eat, like how do we make this thing grow and get sustenance. So it'll be fascinating to see from the outside in.
And they are going to be 2 different approaches, because Diablo 4 is still being marketed as an ARPG, whereas Diablo Immortal, they are specifically using the verbiage MMO ARPG. And so that the way that they tackle content and such are going to be different. Just not even like, of course, console, console PC versus mobile, but they are marketing them as basically 2 kind of separate genres. But the guys behind Immortal are very intelligent, extremely talented. That if anyone's going to be able to crack this thing, it's them.
Oh yeah, no doubt. Like. Whether it takes a little bit of time, or they find some keys to success earlier than later, it's going to work, I think, because they're committed enough to the project that it's not going to be, oops, we made a mistake, run away. Like, they're definitely honing and hedging everything together, so that once it does get to the point where they can start just crazy talking about it and blasting it, I'm sure we're going to get inundated. There'll be Twitch ads for that. People like, how do I skip these? And all sorts of stuff, right?
I can't wait. I can't wait. I'm still, that's probably my most the game that I'm looking forward to the most for 2020 is still Immortal. Not to discredit like Last of Us 2 and Final Fantasy 7 remake, but once I play through those games, I'll play through them. But the one that I will spend the most amount of time on.
It's gonna change a lot. It's definitely gonna be revolutionary. And I like just mentioning your idea again. If there is crossover, and it might take some time because D4 is going to take months, years before it's out, if we imagine Diablo Immortal's coming much sooner. But it could give you some time in between time to build up whatever you're doing on DI, and if that does end up having cool tie-ins to D4, then not only are you sort of qualifying that time, but you're also giving people a reason to dive into both, where they might want to separate themselves as, I only play this or I only play that. Of course you might get a bit abrasive if you feel you have to play both to get the best experience. There's
a fine line there, because you don't want to like have, you can only unlock this mythic if you beat this raid in Immortal.
Yes.
You beat this raid in Immortal and it will drop a key to unlock this boss in this dungeon, and it's the only way of doing it, and only he drops this mythic. Because that's the wrong way of doing it. We're not asking for that, but just like mostly, I guess, really cosmetics, things of that, which I think, going back, taking another step back, that I think Path of Exile does so well is they sell like spell and skill cosmetics. So that way you can actually, that boss has like a really cool giant ass laser beam. Well, you can, I want that. Well, here you go, $12, it's yours.
And if you think about it too, it solves the one of the early criticisms of D3, where it felt like you weren't RPGing enough, right? Your character wasn't different enough from everyone else's barbarian or demon hunter. That is certainly a way to separate. If you make 1 million different types of footprints, 1 million different types of wings, 1 million different literal versions of skills, now, we use the same Frost Nova or something, but mine has sparkles at the end and yours generates a pony at the end or something, like we're different. Decidedly.
That was one of my favorite things back in like Star Trek Online is celebrating its 10th anniversary next week, and going back through like some of my old screenshots and memories and such for just some of the promotions that they've been doing. One of my favorite things back in the early game was that there were certain parts of the debugging menu that were open to everybody by choice. Like one of them was the ability to change the graphics of your weapons. So that way, if you were using phasers, you could change them to disruptors, but then also add on like the Polaron pulse to it. So you could change the width, like the different arcing effects inside the beam, and then the color. And then they ended up taking that away. And that's just like, it's so cool, to go through and be like, you were mentioning, make your character different from everyone else by, everyone is using this rune of Archon, whatever, for that particular color, or this bonus or what have you, that I want a different color. I want my arrows to be blue, not red, But
as simple as that.
Yeah. And that is things people are willing to spend money on. You price it accordingly, and people are like, I'll spend $1 for that. Yeah,
and I think it's getting to the point where development teams are starting to realize this. I think it's easy to have resistance to it, because you're like, that doesn't really do anything for the game, though. Like, I want to develop the game, I want to add more content, I want to make it so you have more to do. And of course, that's very important to a lot of players, but it shouldn't also prevent you from just making extra fun stuff. Like, even if a good majority of your players don't engage with it, one thing I've started to realize from diving into mobile gaming a little bit more is you're going to get your whales, and they will make up for so many percent of people that never touch. They'll easily get you back that money and then some, because they're the ones that are fully invested, and they want to collect everything. They want to touch all the cosmetics, all the buyables. They will, like, it happens. You just have to, what's that famous phrase? If you build it, they will come. Right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, that is one I remember going through and seeing with like one of the mobile games I used to play. What was it, Realm of War? It was like
Mhm.
the game was out for like 2 months, and I stopped playing because they kind of like they broke the matchmaking system. But going through and seeing some of the people on the forums, they're like, "Yeah, I spent $20,000 in the game." Like, what? The fuck? Like, God,
Disposable income.
right? You know, it's like, geez, man.
Some people just they choose that's where it's going, Some people might buy a drink or two, get a new car. Some people just want to invest in their favorite game as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So give them avenues. One thing that has been kind of an interesting trend recently is we hit the season of delays or announcements of games that you thought were coming sooner than they actually were.
Mm-hmm.
So, two games to hit that are also on our radar for this year's ARPGs are games that are actually coming out. However, they're coming out later than we thought. Wolcen is one that I just find it hard to put a pulse on it because I guess it's been one that's in development hell for so long, and it's officially supposed to have come out this January,
Uh-huh.
but it got pushed
Push
back
to
to
like the day
the day
before.
before Valentine's.
Yeah, February 13th.
Mm-mm.
Tentatively.
Someone's, yeah, it could change again, right? It is coming. That game intrigues me. I definitely am going to play it on release because if I recall correctly, they had a really interesting skill system with these sort of like circles that you could turn to path your character through essentially a very wide number of combinations
Uh,
to
that
build your character.
that was one of the things that I was really intrigued by when I watched someone going through and streaming it. That it's like you could go through and they were branching out in a inefficient way, but that was because they were just going to turn the skill tree and then take these two dips into this one that was going to give them a huge stat increase and then twist it back, and then it
Mm,
would like unlock like in a more efficient path than going. So you start here and you go that way, because then when you go through and you turn it, it like goes here, as opposed to going down that direction in the first place, because it wasn't efficient. Like you got
it's like Rubik's
trash.
Cube, the ARPG.
Yeah, like let's take PoE's sphere grid and make it more complicated.
Because that's what everyone's been asking for. This
Exactly.
thing's too simple.
I want more.
Give me knobs to turn.
Literally.
So even just from that aspect, I think it'll be cool. And obviously, it's supposed to be a really pretty game. There's they've done a lot with development. I follow them on Twitter, so I see every now and again talk about some skills and some videos, and it looks like it's got something to it. So I didn't try it at all during any of the beta or alpha phases. So this will be a fresh dip.
Mm-hmm.
And then in concert with that sort of delay of things you thought were coming, last Epoch also announced a delay as well too.
They're back to April now.
I feel like April was the initial release date. I I can quickly do a search because I have a link to their server within my Discord server. I think it's in September now, but I could be talking out of my butt. Um, but I guess the sort of the takeaway that I'm getting from all of these things is that, yeah, so it got moved to, they didn't even have a date for it now. It's Q4 2020
Oh, okay.
for the pushback. And the reasoning behind it was that I think they're on track, but they are, I guess, sort of noticing that there's going to be a new level of polish required to compete with all the other. If you essentially think about it, right? Like you saw D4 fire their shot, you
Mm-hmm.
saw PoE 2 fire their shot, and if you're looking at your game and you're like, crap, we thought we were ready to release, and it doesn't look like those games.
Yeah, you can't really, you can't release like last gen,
Yeah,
because then you're already playing catch up. You're starting behind.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think it's disappointing to some degree because one thing that we as players often ask for is certainty in terms of what we can expect. So we want release dates. We want to be able to plan when we're going to hop into our next game. And it's brave of developers to put some of those dates out there. But I'm never too disappointed by moving dates because if it means a better product in the end, then I think you should always go that route.
Oh,
I want
yeah.
to play the best version of the game.
And that's something that we've just been seeing lately, because what was it, just outside of ARPGs, the Last of Us, so that was a couple of months ago that Last of Us pushed themselves back, but then just like the past 2 weeks, I think it was Final Fantasy VII and Cyberpunk
Yeah,
Both,
two hugely anticipated games.
yeah, like I think what was it? Last of Us went from February to March, or yeah, and then the Final Fantasy VII I think like went to May or something
I
like
think,
that.
I think March to April
April,
or
March,
maybe
April, yeah.
May.
They gave themselves like an extra month, but then Cyberpunk I think is now September.
That's I think that's the September one. Yeah.
Yeah, that one a while. But even like going back and looking at last Epoch, going for quarter 4 is pretty interesting because then you're giving time for Immortal to come out, and if PoE 2 is supposed to come out, and then the quarter 4 is going to be BlizzCon with obviously a bunch of new updates for D4. Like you're giving yourself time to develop more content and more polish for the game, but you're also increasing your competition, so to speak. Like
Yeah,
if the
you're in the
game
eye
is
of the storm.
yeah, if the game is good and there's some extra features you want to add into it to compete, maybe you should come out early and then do that as like a free like patch, like 1.1, type
Update,
thing
yeah.
update. But like you kind of need to get out there before, like the competition is going to start eating up that market, that crowd. There's a lot more people are going to be looking for those titles, than the smaller the smaller projects.
Yeah, your avenue of space to just talk about your game is going to get eaten up in the news of, oh yeah, this just happened for D4. Here's a million articles. Oh, this just happened for PoE. Here's a million articles. And right at the bottom here, don't forget there's Last Epoch that did something too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're right. I can only imagine that they. I wonder how much game devs share stuff with each other. I'm gonna imagine that Last Epoch didn't necessarily have advanced info on like PoE's plans or Diablo's plans, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking they probably saw originally a bit of a dearth or an opening to hit Q2 2020, which is April, what they're originally aiming for, and now that because they feel they have to delay, they're kind of taking the hit of coming out way closer to competition, but hopefully the product is so much better that it'll balance out
Mm-hmm.
to overall net positive. One thing I think to consider too, though, is think about like a primed pump, if you will, which is kind of a phrase they throw into the market sometimes. Where if there's so many people talking about ARPGs, they're gonna just be looking at
Yeah.
for ARPGs and what's happening within the
What
genre.
what
So
can I
even by
do in the
that,
meantime?
yeah,
Yeah.
yes. And so by that, you kind of get free marketing from these other giants, kind of churning the water for people that are looking like, man, I want to play an RPG. And they're like, oh, this is out. Let me try it.
Yep.
Could be a nice side effect. But you're definitely right. I think they have a lot to consider coming out at that time.
Not an easy decision. I'm definitely not envious of those board meetings.
Mm-mm. Definitely not. And I guess the last game to mention, well, it's funny too because this is the last one or two that are on my radar. But then we had like what was it, the Video Game Awards or something, and there were other like ARPG titles. There's so many, man. It's insane. Because there's like a Baldur's Gate thing coming, right?
There's a Baldur's Gate, yes, and at the Video Game Awards, they announced, even though it's not the spiritual successor to Baldur's Gate, Dark Alliance.
That's what it was.
Yeah, which it was a console hack and slash. One of my favorite console games back in the day. They were just they were pretty awesome, if not like being a little bit broken. But that's the fun part, right?
It's fun, right? Yeah. And there's a Magic the Gathering universe-based one that's coming. It's an ARPG that was also part of Video Games Award.
The rumors. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, like, there are so many offerings that you're starting to forget what's coming, sooner or later or whatever.
Yeah.
It's just so much insanity around it. But you were about to say.
And then also like the rumors of some of the unlabeled little quick screenshots that we saw from the Riot announcement last year. That there was some things that people were saying that looks like an ARPG. Nothing officially announced or anything like that, but that'd be something else to go through, and that because it would be coming from a name like Riot, instant success. If they
big studio
building off of an incredibly well-known IP.
Yes. Yeah. Just oh my God. Think of how much attachment there is for millions of players that have been playing because they were celebrating 10 years of Riot, right? Which is
Mm-hmm.
just basically 10 years of League of Legends. And now they're finally making new games. Uh like the attachment people already got to Overwatch from just the characters and the stories that they've been building. Just think of 10 years of that already set in place.
Yeah.
Like the world's gonna be so rich. It's nuts. It's so nuts. Hopefully you can build a good game on it, by the way. That's
I mean,
important.
that would be, that would be like a little important part there.
But the potential is insane, like you were saying. And that's just another thing that'll add more competition, which I think is probably the hallmark of all of this is if you have all these giants and even like indie fledglings and such all going to bat for the genre, just think of the hopeful player equity that we get
Mm-hmm.
from being able to choose any of these games. And as developers see people shunting themselves into I'm a Diablo player, I'm a PoE, I'm like, no, I want them playing my game, so we're going to improve this. It's going to drive so much innovation.
That's like one of the things, like Dreadsife's been going on talking about like skill design and stuff like that. And I think that he is going to love like Last Epoch when it finally goes through and comes out, because everything that he's ever wanted in like skill customization is in that game. Like that particular mechanic that he has going on in his head sounds so much similar to what they're doing, in that particular title. There's really going to be like a lot of options out there for what makes an ARPG better for you. Is it the character customization? Is it the difficulty of the content? Is it like the association with like the lore and the characters? What have you? There's going to be those things that are going to bring people in regardless. And then
go ahead. Finish.
I was just going to be saying, and there's going to be kind of it's on the developers to give the follow through to then keep you there.
Yeah, and I was just gonna tie in real quick. I wonder if it'll come down to you won't see developers trying to do everything well, but they're similar to kind of how PoE has just we're doubling down on being the ARPG for the hardcore player.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if each one will really try to nail a certain aspect, like you were saying. And Last Epoch, we're the game. If you want to customize the hell out of your skills, come play us. D4 might be we're the game if you want these crazy overworld boss battles. That's what we're doubling down on, or like we're actually the PvP guys, right? This is something you wanted to talk about too, the D4 competition aspect. Still boggles my mind that it seems so many of the ARPGs have moved finally away from this aspect of PvP, and D4 is like we're releasing it on day one.
Which I guess is one of those things, because I mean, people still talk about PvP from the D2 days and such, and that was again, it had its niche, it has its own little market community and stuff like that no one has really done anything for since then. No one's deemed it necessary, and so to go back through and have that aspect being a core design pillar of Diablo 4. Well, one, that's awesome. That's cool that it's a different way of playing the game, which will entice more people to come in and play. And I hope it works out.
It's a bold call.
It really is. Though, I find myself my kind of like go to turn my mind off and let me just relax from the day game nowadays is honestly, though it's been that way for a while, is Heroes of the Storm. And so just it's. Basically League of Legends and such is just non-stop PvP 100% of the time. And so, like, I can definitely see myself with D4 as long as the content is, I guess, balanced. That will probably be one of my preferred ways of going, because that was one of the things that got me back into a Legion. Going through and playing a Legion was like the PvP content. And then, of course, from there I went back and started doing, some of the LFR and the World Quest and stuff like that. But it definitely is something I'm interested in personally.
It's pretty interesting because I think we have two things here that are kind of trying to come together. One is providing an innovative or unique gameplay experience that will differentiate you from the other offerings. And so if you are trying to be the game that does PvP, that's certainly a way to go about it, since, like we said, no one's really honing in on it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But also there has sort of been this move towards like capturable experiences, which is to say you can, Josh used to talk about this quite a bit, sort of that like 15 minutes of sitting down. I don't have a lot of time. I just want to like hop in, hop out. If they can create a PvP experience that hits on that, then I think that could be really interesting. I wonder how you do it, because if it's something where you need to have built up characters, there has to be a level of investment previous to being able to get the 15-minute chunks.
Yeah.
To build up your PvP account and have the gear for it and such. But if they do decide to also go like more of a pre-made route or have that as like a mode perhaps, then maybe that's a way to get people just trying it. And then it's sort of I wouldn't call it tutorial, but like the beginner phase of try this PvP.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you really like that, then you can like say truly build out, your own build character, gear, skills, etc. That's going to be specifically for that.
Yeah.
And maybe that's where you build the competitive scene as well too.
Yeah, where you have like the yeah, because that's like one of the biggest issues always in the ARP, or not just ARPGs, but like in RPG like PvP, like the WoW arenas and such, is you have to have huge limitations on the gear, in order to actually try and make it balanced, because those little bit of those gear differences can basically make things unwinnable. Well, I remember back like at Wrath of the Lich King, having one particular like trinket off of a boss in ICC, that you're just now, oh well, there's no beating that warrior. He's gonna kill everyone that gets into his face. Or even going back like WoW Classic, like they haven't done much in the way of releases, with WoW Classic. It's kind of I guess
core experience.
Just the core experience, but like at the end of WoW Classic, if your server had a guild that was able to beat Kel'Thuzad, you basically had a terrible PvP experience. A warrior that had the Mace of Menethil killed everything, like literally like just 2 auto attacks, and would probably kill the half of any of the mages or casters like in the PvP zones. Like, geez. Yeah, if you were only like going through and like having like a pug of Blackwing Lair or something like that, like there's no way that you would ever touch anybody that had Nax gear. Like the level difference in the gear was just night and day. You weren't even like, it wasn't like level 60 versus level 60. It was like going around and just like, oh, I'm picking on like level 15 guys.
Jeez.
Yeah.
It's a big gulf. And we were kind of talking about it earlier in terms of like what are the new problems that need to be solved going into this sort of next generation of ARPGs. Maybe this is that, right? If we do see the reemergence of PvP and competitive modes, it feels like for the most part the competitive side of ARPGs right now is this racing aspect. We see it mainly out of PoE. Basically choosing some point, whether it's level based or story based, to get to faster than anyone else with certain rule sets in place. Last Epoch ran a couple of races as well, so it's proliferating the genre a bit. But if we have that as a thing, and then also they want to, with D4, bring PvP back to the forefront, maybe the next question to solve is, where is that balance? Do you actually just drop gear that is PvP exclusive throughout PvE, so that you might, and see, that's the thing, right? Is if you have players that just want to PvP, you're kind of forcing them into this PvE, which might suck. But if you have this classic gear that can only be brought into PvP, then you can super balance around it because you know what people will be bringing.
Yeah, to a certain extent, because they also tried that in WoW, but it had the opposite effect, where the core PvPers that had like tons of resilience gear and such, that if you didn't have it and went in, you couldn't do damage. Like resilience was like a built-in damage reduction stat that only occurred in player versus player, and it just like, if you had 0 resilience, you had no chance. That even though it was taking up basically like in a fixed slot, so the PvPers stats were lower, they just had so much extra survivability because of the resilience that they, like, someone coming in, unless you were tiers of gear above them, you had the opposite experience. You still had no chance of winning, not because that the other person would just one shot you. It was because you just
Unkillable.
yeah, they became unkillable.
Mm. Yeah, it's not an easy solve.
Mm-mm.
You know, with and I think it's so funny because the things that I've heard us all actively asking to happen for D4, such as like the interplay of skills mattering, stats mattering, gear mattering,
Mm-hmm.
it complicates the equation further, right? So you have so many different levers the developers can pull to provide player power. But when you're in a mode where it needs to be bounced from player to player, my goodness, like what do you turn off? What do you limit? What do you it's I don't envy them any at all.
Yeah. And like you were mentioning with like the path of exile with like the races and such, because that PvP would only be one form of competition. When we're talking about like the dungeon keys and such, this is actually one of the larger draws as far as like competitive World of Warcraft stuff. Is like
Yes.
the mythic dungeons and the mythic dungeon invitational. It's like what if you go through and you have some form of um, you know PVE competition, in that respect.
That it would be so sick, man. I
Mm-hmm.
think once you get towards something like keys, you're getting very close to seeds, if you will, right? So you can generate maybe the same key for everybody, these like developer keys. And then if you can have exhibitions at BlizzCon or like fully build up a community around like these PvEVP versions of where you all have similar keys, or sorry, it has to be the same key,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and take our team in and see who can beat that dungeon the fastest or whatever. Like, it'd be so cool just to have a stage for Diablo to exhibit some of that competitive play.
Yeah, something along the lines where you're kind of given like an idea, like you're told beforehand it's going to be this dungeon with this mob layout or something along those lines, but you have no
Mhm.
idea what level or mob affixes it's actually going to be. So you have to like put some thought into it about like what characters or what builds you're going to pull. And so you go through, you get there, you go to BlizzCon, you do some warm up scrims and stuff like that to get a feel for it, and then you're like, oh shit, and then you actually have to get on stage and then do it. You know,
Perform, yeah,
because it's
yeah,
a
because it's cool. You see it, just real quick in MDI. You see, people don't necessarily bring the exact same comps or teams or whatever,
mm-hmm.
because each team kind of approaches with, we think this is the best way to get through this dungeon. We need these rogues to be cloaking through and getting us to initiate this boss fight as quick as possible. And it'd be fascinating to see how many of like the classes that have certain skills that'll synergize to when you're just trying to make it all about speed objectives. And yeah, I don't know, man.
Mm-hmm.
When I start to think about it, I like can't even finish sentences because my brain's racing trying to think of every possibility.
There's a lot of different directions that they could go, or a lot of different resources that they could pull from. And we kind of I go back to like that whole the mythic dungeon competition, just because it's internal at Blizzard. They have access to those developers, in order to go through and help out and run things by and get feedback. If you were building a whole new engine when you're wanting to go through and like and make mythic dungeons, like the mythic dungeon invitational, a core component of your game, what change would you make to your engine, type thing, since they're
Mhm.
still building it for D4.
Yeah. Oh man, it's one of those sky's the limit type of things.
Yeah.
And I do hope, because I guess that's another aspect of sort of developing an ARPG in 2020 and beyond, is you do have a world of streaming now, of esports being very fleshed out and still room to grow for sure. Blizzard, kind of fully being on board now across multiple games with their esports offerings. So it's not this thing anymore that's sort of like you could do it if you want to, like most people don't, in terms of like having an esports component. Like you're seeing so many games that maybe aren't developed for esports, but they're certainly thinking about it,
Mm-hmm.
or they're at least hoping to draw in some competitive element that you could develop a tournament or sponsorship around.
Basically visibility. You want something that you can
Yes.
put out there, maybe not necessarily with a huge focus on esports, but at least some form of streamable content that you can build a system around.
Yeah, it goes right back to what you were saying before, right? Like the new marketing is really, hey, I got a streamer.
Yeah.
Give them some stream keys. Give them, a reason to really promote this game and play it.
Yeah, in 2020, if you are not developing a game with Twitch in mind, you're doing it wrong.
I 100% agree.
Yeah.
I was even thinking at one point, like, I wonder how much developers are like, all right, our UI looks like this, but streamers are gonna put their box right here, like.
I mean, it's one of those things. It's like you gotta have like an empty corner. You have to when you're developing a game UI, you have to have an empty corner for someone to put their webcam in.
I just imagine like designing with a perpetual like post-it note on your monitor. It's like, all right, the cam is here. Don't forget.
Yeah. Or what about the developer that's going through that unintentionally is making their game UI around like the UI of their favorite streamer?
That would actually be cool.
It's like they always have their webcam in the top left-hand corner, so they just left the top left-hand corner, completely open.
And I can see that even happening like by accident,
Oh, that's what I was saying, unintentionally.
Yeah, for sure. Like you're not even realizing you're being influenced.
Yeah. Well, I have to have that open corner because that's where they're going to go through and stream from. Hold on, wait, what? Like,
Yeah. And I guess within that vein, I don't want to open up too many big topics if we're about to wrap soon, but something that we've seen, for instance, at ExileCon, one thing they enabled was Twitch drops. So if you were watching with your Twitch account and had it synced to your PoE account, then after watching for a certain amount of hours, you became eligible to get in-game drops. And it's just cosmetics, like you get a purple, whatever, back attachment, helmet, etc. And so it's... Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, is this idea of having that level of engagement and understanding that where your audience is coming from is where your audience is coming from. And so just adding on extra layers of keeping them captive and attentive, I wonder how much integration we'll see with games in the future of like streamer mode or like, Twitch influenced in your game, being able to, you spawn a drop and it enables, for 5 people, lucky people in your chat, they also get the same drop, or like you can, there's 3 chests and like, all right, Twitch chat, time to vote. You know what I mean? Like many different things that could be integrated.
Blizzard actually does that with all of their games except for Diablo.
Have drops.
Yeah. If you're watching Overwatch League, you actually gain you gain coins that you can purchase the team skins with. When they used to do the Heroes of the Storm competition, though, I think they still do it for like the TESPA Collegiate series and such, that they'll randomly pick X number of viewers in stream and you'll get like a loot box.
Sick.
Yeah, just or you can just sit and watch and get emotes and stuff like that. Yeah,
it definitely is a commonplace thing now more than certainly back in 2012.
Because if someone's watching if you're giving someone the reason, if someone's watching your game, they're probably going to play your game. So it's more money in your pocket.
You definitely have to be thinking about it. So yeah, man, the future is bright. I think this year, it still feels more announcy than playable. If you wanted to categorize it, well, I think we'll be seeing more things that we'll be touching, but it just is going to continue to ramp up. That we're going to hear more offerings and more details, and then eventually these things will be downloadable.
Yeah. I was kind of surprised that we still haven't seen the PTR yet. By the time we started recording this episode, or at least patch notes for it and what have you. Maybe by the time that we go through and we do the next episode, we'll have the D3 PTR, and we'll pretty much be like right on the cusp of the Wilson release as well. Like just a week before. So yeah, there's gonna be a lot to go through and start looking at, and everything. I was just watching SVR was on Riker's stream earlier today, and listening to them, SVR just kind of like made the comment about how he had to spend so much time like after BlizzCon, then going back and like taking in the content and everybody else's feedback from BlizzCon, and that it's a great time to go and try new games, to get ideas with what can they do next, that I can look at this next like D4 developer blog, coming out within like the next, the next 2 months, by the end of March. for quarter 1. Just that will be like, I would never have thought of looking at it this way if I hadn't done this, because
Yes.
I've kind of put a lot of the Diablo 2 mindset so far back that with the um I was looking at the Diablo 3 mindset that I put the Diablo 2 like way far back, that when Diablo 4 was announced, talking with No One's Minion about just having like that new system that they have developed, the angelic and demonic powers, so that way you actually have to make gearing decisions in order to put items on or to unlock the affixes and such, where that's just a core mechanic of Path of Exile. It's just how the game is. If I didn't really have that conversation, I wouldn't have put too much thought into it. When I saw that developer blog.
Right. Yeah. And I think that is sort of the reasoning. And of course, SVR is going to be someone that does this. Is you're so much stronger for evaluation and in your own development of ideas if you can understand a multitude of viewpoints. And you might not be able to play everything, but that is such a good reason to seek out other people's feedback, because they're going to be bringing their own experiences and gameplay journeys into their feedback, right?
Yeah.
Exciting times.
Exciting times, but yeah. I think that it's now 11, so I think this is probably a good time to go through and close it up. So even though you kind of just had your final thoughts and such, do you have any final thoughts? Anything that you anything that you want to end on?
I have a million final thoughts. I just want to, I guess, put some love in the atmosphere for where we are right now. One thing I always kind of jokingly say is that you can download like 2 ARPGs to your computer and your hard drive won't explode. It's incredible.
It's true.
You can play so many games right now. And just to think back to even being a high schooler, I've been reading through some old live journals. I'm like, oh my God.
Oh God.
What was my life? But, I had some entries in there just about when I was playing D2. And never would I have imagined that I could put down a D2 and pick up a, blank and have the same sort of experience, but imagined differently. Like if I wanted an ARPG, it was Diablo 2 at that time. So I guess I just want to put love in the atmosphere to all the developers that are making something out there and sort of putting their soul into what they believe is going to be the next best thing for the genre. Like, thank you, and please keep us in the loop. Like, keep just developing, believe, and stick to your mission statements. Like, find that niche that's going to make your game super interesting, because I want to play it and I want a reason to like just be wowed and be like, I never thought of thinking of an ARPG like this, but here it is.
Yeah, and everyone has a different take. Everyone has a different thought or idea and such. When you have like a big company like Blizzard, obviously you've got the game directors and such that will kind of focus feedback and creativity and such, where you have a guiding vision. But it's a lot of that innovation comes from the small independents. Like the one that has like 3 or 4 developers that just had this crazy idea that they want to go through, and it just got like going back to last epoch. I know. Let's put a skill tree in the skill.
Just right in there.
Right, just that's it. That's how we do it. So it's there's definitely something to be said for having more voices, more ideas.
Yeah, and also just the quick and nimble development.
No. But yeah.
How about yourself? Your final thoughts?
I think you pretty much you summed it up very nicely, though. There's definitely a lot that's out there. There are some things that I definitely want to go through and try. Chaos Bane has been one of those ones, just because it's Warhammer, so I go through and pick up. And it's Tomb Kings was the expansion that they went through and came out with a couple weeks ago. And so it's just maybe it's worth it to just go through, pick it up, grab the season pass, and see where that takes me over the next couple of months. While waiting for the next Diablo season or what have you. Wilson definitely looks very interesting. I mean, the game looks beautiful. So I think I'm just gonna have to dedicate some time to trying some different games. Path of Exile has always been one that I've been afraid of because I just don't have the time to dedicate. But maybe one of these other ones I can just kind of like pick up and play. Eventually get to the end game and experience it a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have to enroll in PoE school first, so I don't know if you want to pay that tuition just yet.
We'll work on that one. We'll get there. We'll get there
Yes,
eventually.
for sure. We'll get a scholarship for you.
Yep. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Again, thank you very much for going through, and this has been a couple months in the works, going through and getting you back on the show. Hopefully, it won't be quite as long by the next time that I've got you on here.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, but
Thank you. It's been super fun to hop back into this, and I miss talking to you. I miss having these sorts of conversations. This is like what I fell in love with to begin with. So
yeah, and especially for those that didn't watch us here on Twitch, like the pre-show and then the pre-show when we were just going through and getting the stream connected, and just absurdity of things, life and what have you.
yes.
It's good catching up. We will have to do this. We will have to do this more often.
Yeah, man. I gotta hang out with the SoCal Clash champ.
I am so pissed. I almost pulled the trigger on like the Las Vegas thing, but it's like I completely forgot that it was the film festival. So I'd be flying back in from Las Vegas at 6 a.m. and then having to go to work at 11.
Ooh, that's
Yeah.
a rough turnaround.
That would not be good. Especially for like the reasons I was explaining before the show about why I kind of need to be on my game for when it comes to next week. There's gonna be so many surprises, and I'm looking forward to it.
Oh yes.
/S. But yeah, you could go through. You could join me here on the show live on Twitch. Every other Wednesday. It's going to be at twitch.tv/BlizzPro. I record every other Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. I believe there will be a minor scheduling conflict in that the next episode, instead of being recorded on February 5th, will actually be recorded on Thursday, February 6th, because I do have a event at work on the evening of the 5th. But you can always go through. If you don't catch the show live, you can always catch it on YouTube over at BlizzPro's YouTube channel, and then you can also find us on Stitcher, iTunes, your podcasting platform of choice. And if you wanna email, send some feedback to the show, with your thoughts, your feelings, what you're looking forward to in the realm of ARPGs, feel free. Westmarch Workshop at blizzpro.com. Again, that email address is westmarchworkshop at blizzpro.com. And then you can tweet at the show. It's at the WM Workshop. You can follow there for when we're going live and the schedule and what have you. You can also find pretty much all things Diablo over at diablo.blizzpro.com. Also, we're in game with the BlizzPro clan in the Westmarch Workshop community. There's also the BlizzPro Discord at discord.gg/BlizzPro. And then, of course, you can follow me personally at Neinball Gamer on Twitter or twitch.tv/Neinball. And where can the lovely people at home find you, good sir?
They can find me all over the internet, mainly over at twitch.tv/Leviathan111. If you want to see, and talking about branching out a bit, been mainly playing Final Fantasy 14 lately, getting my MMO chops up. Hopefully that'll help me out in some Diablo Immortal or even Diablo 4. And otherwise, just chatting it up on Twitter. That's Leviathan over there. And either way, just come and hang out. We got lots to get excited for.
And with that will bring the show to a close.